switch back to my script here.
Recording in progress.
Good morning. Welcome to the Corning Museum of Glass and Marvelous Marble Day here. Happy Valentine's Day. We know that's a holiday that everybody celebrates, but we have a special day around the same time every year called Marvelous Marble Day. And it's a day that we celebrate one of the oldest entertainment forms in the world, and all things round and glass at the museum. It's probably a good time for me to to introduce myself. My name is Troy Smythe, and I am the Education and Interpretation Supervisor for the Corning Museum of Glass here in Corning, New York. I have some guests with me who I'll introduce in just a bit, but this is the first virtual program we've offered on Marbles, and so if you're tuning in, I'm really, really glad that you're here. Hopefully next year we'll be able to be in person like we have in the past, and maybe it'll be a combination of the two for the people who can't get here. That's the thing I'm excited about this year. The world of marbles, the community of glass sphere makers, and people who collect them is worldwide. So we're really grateful for a technology that allows us to reach out and talk about something we're passionate about here at the Corning Museum of Glass, and that other people are passionate about throughout the country and throughout the world. I wanted to, we have a special guest with us today who is both a marble expert, player, as well as a coach, as well as a collector. And his name is Doug Watson. Doug comes to us from Maryland, where he heads up his own marble team. He is also on the board of the National Marble Tournament, which I'm going to let him tell you about in just a little bit. But last year, Doug brought his collection with him, and it was so beautiful, and there were so many great pieces in it. I wanted him to share some of it with you today. And then as we were talking to our hot glass staff, for those of you who've never been to the museum before, anything that can be made in glass has probably been made here, and if not, it will be probably in the future at the museum. We have an incredible staff of talented artists who make glass every day, and who also capable of making marbles. So we thought it'd be fun if we could show you one of Doug's pieces of his collection, and then have them show you how it might have been made. So let me stop talking for a bit and turn it over to Doug. And Doug, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and how you came into this world and where you've been in it since?
Hey, thanks, Troy. Appreciate the kind invite. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for letting me join you today on this marvelous Marble Day. I'm really excited to be here. Like Troy said, I was a former national champion with the National Marbles Tournament. I'm currently the director of the tournament, vice president. And I also run a local grassroots tournament in Anne Arundel County, Maryland, where I teach kids how to play competitively. And I also offer educational programs with marbles as the teaching tool, but based on education standards. So if that's something that interests you, please reach out. I think it's a great opportunity for us to, since we're in such a digital world now, especially now, it's great to unplug and get back to the grassroots games and things that we played as kids. And we can do that through marble games. So if you're curious about ideas or how to create an activity or event for your students or your homeschool crew or your kids, please contact me. The easiest way to reach me is you can reach me through the National Marble Tournament website, nationalmarbles.tournament.org, or you can email me at, let's see, which email could I give you? I have a couple. You can do doug.watson@nationalmarbles.tournament.org, and I can point you in the right direction about some of those things I mentioned. I'm also a fourth grade teacher in Anne Arundel County. I've got a great group of kids back home. If anybody was watching, hey guys, what's going on? So yeah, a couple years ago, I heard about this event here in the beginning of February, and I was really excited that Corning Museum of Glass had invited some of our national champions to come participate in this wonderful day. And one thing that I hope to do is begin bridging the gap between the collectors and the artists and the players, because marbles is such a vast, endless category of interest that I feel like a lot of folks are kind of just stuck in their little niche. The players, they know about playing, the collectors know about their collecting stuff, and the artists know about, creating these wonderful things. And it's opportunities like this where we can all come together and share our thoughts and interests and really bounce some ideas off each other and, take something home that's worthwhile and realize things that, hey, I didn't know that marbles were made like this, or I had no idea that I could make an education game based on marbles. I'm sure the artist never even considered that we could teach a chemistry lesson with marbles. Well, I'm sure you have, because you understand the chemistry. But maybe the educators out there don't realize that there's a whole chemistry lesson designed right around marbles that you could use. The opportunities are endless with that. But like I said, I was really excited that this program started a few years ago at the Corning Museum of Glass, and they invited our champions there. Last year, I got the opportunity to come participate in person. It was awesome. We got to play marbles all day long. I got to meet new families and new people that are interested in the game. So I hope that continues, and hopefully this message is received by everyone out there and spark some interest to generate some more opportunities for players to compete. And maybe you want to start a local club near you. And if that's a question on your mind, please reach out. We can help you get those pieces in line to make it happen. And this year, transitioning into a virtual environment, this is, Troy said this is the first time that we've done a virtual environment with the Corning Museum of Glass on this day. Well, last year, the 2020 National Marble Tournament was the first time that we had to cancel the tournament, and we actually ended up holding a virtual event online. It's still up in the air for this year. We haven't made a final decision on that. So for all of you folks who are wondering about that information, that will be coming out in the next few months on whether or not the tournament will be held this summer. But last summer was the first time the National Marble Tournament has been canceled, and I put air quotes on that, since World War II. But we're not just about competition. The National Marble Tournament's not just competition. It's about family, it's about our marble community, and it's just about a sense of belonging and getting together. And we didn't want to miss out on that opportunity. So that's why we held a virtual online tournament where we had elimination games, some challenge games, some skill shots, to challenge our players all across the country, and to get together and have our little, camaraderie and hang out with each other. So that was a really unique experience. And if we come to that again this year, I'm excited about it because we've learned from last year on what things worked, what didn't. So stay tuned for details on that. In the playing community, just to give you a little more information about the National Marble Tournament, that's been going on. Like Troy said, marbles have been around for a long, long time. And the National Marble Tournament has been held, it's in Wildwood, New Jersey, and it's the longest ongoing children's event in the country. It was founded in 1922, and the first tournament was held in 1923. So if you do the math on that, we're creeping up on the 100th anniversary of the founding and of the first tournament here in the States for the national event. Now, there's always been some confusion because of those couple years during World War II, and then in the virtual event of 2020, um, on what year the 100th anniversary falls. We still count those years, just to clarify any confusion on that. So all of the years that we skipped, we still counted those as years. Um, so yeah, so this year will be the 98th? Is that right? I got to do my math really quickly. It took last year off. It threw me out of the loop.
Don't ask me to do math. I'm an art person.
Yeah, right. I don't teach math. I'm a language arts guy. So, but anyway, so I'm honored to be here. I wanted to share with you guys some of the marbles from my collection. I sent a few photographs ahead of time for the artists in the shop there to see what I'm going to talk about, and I just got a sneak peek at some of the things that they're going to be making, and I'm really excited to see how I just sent them a photograph and they were able to create this wonderful piece of art. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So my journey with marbles started in 1996. So I was about 10 years old. I started playing in a local club at home, and winning that local tournament qualified me to compete at the national tournament. And after a couple of years of playing, I earned my title as the national champion. And since then, I've been coaching kids. I've been reaching out to try to start new organizations in other areas, and providing all of the experience that I had in the trials and tribulations of starting a new club and how to get them off the ground. I'll do everything I can to try to make that happen, because I want more people to experience the love of the game, the love of glass, and the love of collecting. So that's what, fast forward to 2009, is when I started my collecting journey. And I kind of jumped in head first. I really went all in. I was buying every marble I could find, just learning and researching every day, all along, buying books, going to marble shows, getting into some online forums to learn from more experienced collectors. And it has opened my eyes to a whole new world of marbles. And it also got me an opportunity to get my hands dirty, or hands warm, working on a torch. So from that, I've met some glass artists where they taught me how to make some marbles on a torch. And then a few years ago, my wife gave me a Valentine's Day present where she took me to a hot shop and I got to make a marble in a furnace. So I've dabbled a little bit in all of the glass marble making things. And you can even make marbles out of clay too. But we're not talking about clay today. We're talking about glass. So it was.
Can I jump in here for just a second, Doug?
Yeah, go right ahead, Troy.
It's probably a good time for me to let people know that one of the unique things about the Corning Museum of Glass is that we can actually teach you how to make marbles here. We actually offer glass working classes for beginners, as well as people who've been working with glass for a really long time. And sometimes we actually just teach marble classes. So those are happening virtually as well as in person in limited ways here. So that's something that's available to anybody who has an internet connection. Obviously, we have a set schedule of classes that come along, but we can, kind of get onto the website and look at the class schedule. You can kind of see what's coming out. But anyway, I just wanted to
That's awesome.
put in a plug that everyone can be a glass maker at the Corning Museum.
That is awesome. And one thing I learned from that, I never knew how beautiful glass was until I actually got to start manipulating it and playing around with it. When I tell folks about it, it's like playing with cold honey, right? Or like cold molasses, right? Because it's kind of like really thick and goopy. And but the other thing I didn't realize is how heavy it was, because we think of marbles are like little, they're a little toy, but it's made of glass, and glass on a large scale is pretty heavy stuff. Just from making a small, like 1.5 inch marble that I did on the furnace, I could still feel the weight from that. And when I see these artists making orbs that are, 2, 3, 4, 5 inches in diameter and larger, I can only imagine the amount of energy and strength that goes into making those things. So it's not just an intellectually stimulating hobby, it's also a physical thing as well. So I did see there's a question in the chat box here. It says, where would one to go get some older marbles looked at and valued? So that's a great question. There are some really great online communities that you can get an honest answer for. I'm always willing to give anyone my insight on the value of a marble, but like in most things, number one is condition, right? Condition, condition, condition. That determines majority of your value. Condition, size, color combination, age, company, rarity of color combinations, all of those things factor into the rarity, the collectability, and the value of a marble. And I put air quotes on value because these things they're just collectible and they're fun. And really only valuable is what someone's willing to pay, right? So I will never ever claim to be an expert in valuing marbles or appraising marbles. I will never ever make that claim because I am not. But if you ask me when it comes to playing, I would take that one. I would say that I'm an expert player. But as far as collecting goes, there's so many things to learn, and there's so much history out there and little nuances that I'm learning every day. Every time I open up a new forum or have a conversation with an experienced collector or artist, I learn something new. But
let me jump in here, Doug. We've had this conversation, a version of it before, and I know that there are national, or throughout the United States at least, there are collector shows that marble collectors come together and with people who are experienced seasoned collectors. One of the things I love about marbles is that it is actually a really, I mean, there are very, very, kind of costly marbles out there, but it's also, there are a lot of really good ones that are kind of even fit my budget, so
yes,
I mean, it's a great way to get into collecting. But can you talk a little bit about the shows that are out there?
Absolutely. So as Troy mentioned, marbles can range in a variety of values, right? It can fit any budget. You can go anywhere from dollar store marbles to gather things and learn from, or a jar at a local antique shop of getting some old stuff, $10 just to sort through and have some fun with. But for the marble shows, that's a great opportunity to, I would encourage you to not go there with the intent of selling. I would encourage you to go there with the intent of educating if you ever attend one of these shows. There's some big shows in Ohio. I know there's one in Illinois that's a pretty large show. There's a couple shows in Florida, I believe, that are quite large. Indianapolis
had one recently, and also Branson, Missouri.
Okay, I wasn't aware of the Branson, Missouri one.
It's fairly new. But if people will Google kind of marble, collector shows, then a list will come up, and you have to kind of look for the most current information you have, because schedules, obviously, especially within the pandemic, are changing.
Yeah, so you could Google that. There are some. I would probably rely on. I usually go to Facebook, the marble groups that I belong to in there. Because of the little things that change at the last minute, or especially with our virtual environment we're in now. A lot of things are planned and things might get canned at the last moment. But there's also a big Vegas show every year. So you can go make an excuse to go to Vegas. Like, I'm just going to learn about marbles and, spend a week there one day. But there are lots of shows all around the country. You could get an idea of the value that you have in your collection by, you can go to a local antique shop, get a rough appraisal, but I'm often finding that a lot of antique dealers know a little bit about a lot of things and not a lot about one thing. And that's kind of where I focused my energy. Was like, I'm not going to dabble in all things. I just want to get really good at one. So I focused in on marbles. But I'm available to chat about collections. I will give you an idea on what to expect of a value, but don't ever take anybody's value as, cold hard. This is what it's worth, and this is what I'm going to get for it. Because at the end of the day, it all depends on what someone's willing to pay for a collectible marble.
While we're getting ready to switch it over to our glass workers.
Let me show you a couple of the ones I brought.
Yeah,
is that all right? Excellent. So I will start with some of the older marbles, right? So this little guy here this is a Lutz marble. So this is a handmade antique German marble. This is over 100 years old. And as some of you guys know, that marbles being in pockets or coffee cans could get beat up pretty well. So as always, condition is number one. Now you see these kind of rough spots here on either end where the marble colors kind of come together. Those are what's called a pontil mark. Now glass artists, they use a punty to pick up glass and move things. And this is where that little glass rod would connect to the marble to be moved or to switch to round out the other side or what have you. That's a really good indicator of a handmade marble, not to be confused with a little chip that you might find in the glass. Here's another example of an antique German handmade. Now, what I really like about this one is this red color. It's referred to as oxblood, which I don't see too often in antique German handmade marbles. But oxblood is a pretty collectible, desirable color in most marbles, especially 1930s, 40s machine-made marbles. I don't see oxblood too often in the handmaids though. That's kind of why I really like this one. But you'll notice that this has a little damage to it, so it's not pristine, but I just like the uniqueness of the color combination there. And then fast forward 100 years, and then we jump into some really beautiful pieces like this. This is another, I would call it like a Lutz. I'm not sure if Lutz is the same term that's used in contemporary glass. I'll let the glass artist correct me on that. But I just really love the cleanness of the lines. And some of these, the contemporary marbles, you may see authors' names etched or a little symbol on the marble to indicate who created them. I think I said authors. I'm so used to talking to my students about of artists. I'll save that one for last. Here's another example of an antique German handmade. This one looks a little different. This has a figure on the inside. This is called a sulfide, and this image is quite a rare one to find. If you have any further questions about these, please feel free to reach out to me. The one I want to leave you with is this beauty right here. It has this black and white latticino center. So if you would look at it through the light, the black and white lines would kind of look like lattice on a building, surrounded by that really tight razor ribbon piece there. Beautiful bright colors that really pop. So you can see how some of the older styles are brought over into the newer styles.
Well, I think that's actually a great segue because I believe that our glass team used that as the inspiration for what they're going to work on today. So I'm going to pitch it off to our esteemed glass workers who are working in the museum's amphitheater hot shop, which is a place where you can go and watch glass be made several times during a day at the Corning Museum of Glass. And so our glass workers today are Chris Rochelle and Helen Tigler. And so I'm going to pitch it to them and see what they have to show us.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Corning Museum of Glass and the amphitheater. We are tuning on in-house here with a great audience, and we also have our online audience. So welcome to everyone who's tuning in from far and wide. This is a really special morning that we're going to be working on a marble. And I know that the online community's been getting a lot of education about marbles and some of the collections in our museum. But we've got Chris Rochelle here. He's going to be making an actual bigger style marble. And we'll talk about a lot of the processes and techniques. My name's Helen, and we also have Tom Ryder here. So if there's any questions out there, please feel free to let us know. We've got Amanda narrating or monitoring us online here, so she can answer questions or field them to us if necessary. And of course, we can answer anything in-house as well. So thank you for joining us here today. Hope you're feeling the love on this Valentine's Day with a really special demo. But Chris has already gotten started, just a little bit underway, and he's creating the core of our marble. So we're going to be using some cane here today to create a beautiful pattern. Now they showed a small version of what we're making, but we're going to go for that big bamboozler, that giant one here, the grandfather marble, really big version of a marble that's got a helix cane or a center core of black and white, and then also have a fin that has green and pink on it. So very similar to the one that they saw online, but we can also narrow in on this basket anytime if we want to look at the individual. There we go. Thanks. So we can see the kind of helix and shapes that we're going for today. So we'll talk a little bit more about the technique and the design. Chris has gathered a clear core of glass, and now he's picking up those black and white canes. So canes, very nice pickup. Canes in their basic form are just strings of glass. So we take a solid chunk of color and we encase it with a little bit of clear, and we pull that between two irons and create these very long, thin threads of glass. So we took those threads of glass, chopped them up into little sections, and we call that cane. So we take that little chunk of cane, and in order to attach things with glass, they have to be hot. So we need to warm them up a little bit. So we had a pastorelli plate over here on the side that we laid those up, warmed them up a little bit, kind of making wrapping paper out of them. You heat them enough that they start to stick together, creating a sheet. And then Chris can take some time to just wrap that sheet around this center column. Now there is a little gap in the edge, which is perfect because we also are going to be adding a bit of ribbon cane here, flat cane. So cane can be made round, cane can be made in different shapes and sizes, and a flat cane is going to create a fin on the side. Now, when Chris started to look at these designs, and we got a couple samples sent to us by our co-host here, Doug, he had a nice sample that he wanted us to try to recreate. And we don't have an instruction manual on how that was done. So we're kind of coming up with those techniques to try to come up with the best way to put these objects together. And so Chris has been experimenting over the past week, playing with traditional techniques on how we approach cane making. We use cane a lot in decorating for blown glass, but it's a really lovely old technique that can be pulled in a lot of different ways. So this will be a combination of these thin individual threads and then this nice flattened cane on the side. But one of the important things about using these canes and putting this piece together is we're trying to avoid trapping too much air in the glass. Unwanted air bubbles, they would be a visual, and we're trying to create a clean visual out of this marble. So he's using a pair of Parchovis here that are made of graphite. And you can see that dumbbell shape that's kind of coming out of this as he's squeezing it. What he's trying to do is anywhere those round cane were, if you imagine your fingers set side by side, they're going to be round. That means there's going to be little channels in between each one of those. So when you pick those cane up on the surface of that solid glass, sometimes there's just a little bit of air that traps in those tiny channels. So he's using these tools to squeeze that bubble from the center, or not bubble, but solid, squeeze that mass from the center, kind of pushing that air out the edges to avoid any of those unwanted visuals. Now, a lot of the glass that we're using is also not going to be part of the final object. So he's already cut off a little end piece there. And those little end pieces, they can be saved. They could be acclimated, reused in other ways. A lot of glass blowers will collect the end flowers from all of their cane pieces and reuse that. But for the most part, there's always a certain amount of waste product when you're creating an object like this, because part of making this pattern is actually shrinking that pattern. You pick up all the cane, you pick up all the details, and then you keep twisting and squeezing and pulling off little chunks of it to create the marble that you want. So you're actually kind of shrinking that pattern down. It would be really difficult to pick up a super tiny pattern like that. So instead, we're going to build it up much bigger and then scale it back down. By doing that, it allows us to kind of hide any little wiggle or imperfection. It allows us to create very complicated patterns on a very small scale. And you work all of this glass together to create these packages. And then you can make multiple marbles off of that if you wanted. That's actually one of the original ways that glass marbles that were made by hand is they would make larger scale packages with all that detail and then continue to cut little ones off the middle or off the end rather. And so every one they pull off is a miniature version of the larger pattern.
So I'm just going to jump in a little bit here. Thank you,
Sure.
Helen, for explaining that. I was doing my best to focus on that roll up to ensure I had a good dimension to roll the core and the cane and everything. And the effect that we're going to create with this cane is something called latticino. Right now, the cane are all running parallel, nice and vertical. And we will twist this once we get the ribbon on there and once we get the whole thing cased with some clear glass. There's a lot of different ways to do that. And I was watching some videos last week and I found a video of Mark Matthews, an excellent marble maker, where he made a very similar setup as to what we're doing for this particular marble, but his was to create a special type of cane, but it really had the same process. He had a core of glass color rod and he fused what we call ribbon cane on the surface. Kind of looks like a fin, and you'll see us do this in a moment. And he had a gob mold that he ladled fresh molten glass into and basically makes a cylinder, and you plunge the core, what I have, into that cylinder of molten glass, and that's a great way to case it. So if you look on the floor of our stage here, right in front of the bench that I'm working at, what we have is a graphite pad, a large slab of graphite, and a brass gob mold that we're going to use. So we've practiced this a couple times this morning. We had a trial run. Tom will use a gathering ball to gather a very large amount of glass out at once we have the pattern established, and then we can fuse or we can submerge this into that gob of fresh glass. But as Helen was talking about doing the roll up, it's a little bit easier to do this particular marble on a larger diameter rod that I have. And we're going to scale this down quite a bit so I can squeeze into that mold better. To do the roll up on this rod, I needed a larger roll up to do, but I'm going to get rid of some of this material. Now this is still good glass, the pattern. I'm going to chop half of this off and we'll save it for later so we can turn this into another marble later on. But for now, I just want to get rid of a lot of this material.
We have a request here from our online community. They'd love to see some of these canes and things a little closer. So yeah, awesome. Thanks, Matt. You're doing a great job up there on the AV. So we've got examples of some of the canes. Now, these are the exact ones that he is using here today. So very simple, just a solid core of white and a solid core of black. And that's pretty standard using those just simple canes. But again, we can take that filigrana cane and then we can join them with other canes to create other varieties like Zamperico or twisty cane. So here in the center, we've got a really nice helix effect, and that's not necessarily making the helix per se. He's really doing more of a cage. So if you look in the next one, the yellow one here, that's all of these canes picked up just like he did there and twisted. So we're not going to be twisting this until we actually get all of the pattern together and twist it together. But that's the essential starting point, is we can take the solid cane and then we can gather those either as like a popsicle in the center and then put clear on both sides. And then you have that twisty helix that forms in the center, or a ribbon in the center. And that's a very popular thing with marbles. I think most marbles that you'll find have that kind of helix in the center, and that's how it's made, creating either cane or solid color to create that ribbon. Now we can also start to look at Marini styles and how things are stacked together. And this is a great example of how we can shrink that pattern. You start out with a bigger chunk, you accumulate those together, and as you pull, it just makes the image smaller and smaller and smaller. So we've got lots of examples of both of these kinds of techniques here at the museum, and you can do a lot of searching online as well with our online resources and find some examples if you can't be in-house here joining. But the final bit that we're going to be adding in addition to his cage is, let's see, my flat is this little bit of flat cane. So there's a pink, this is a different color than what he's, oh, here it is. There's a pink and a green side, and that's what we're going to add next is that little fin that will create a ribbon along the side edge. So you can see it's actually two different parts that we're working with, where you could using the fin on the side and then this core bit that was made out of the white and black.
And so we're trying to replicate a marble that is one of the ones in Doug Watson's collection. Doug is a former champion of the National Marble Tournament, as well as a board member of that committee. And he sent us a variety of images from his own collection. And this is one of the more contemporary ones that we looked at that we said would be a lot of fun to try. And I can't say that the way I'm going to make it right now is the way that it was made, but this is just one approach. And in glass making, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. But this gob mold that we're going to use, this is really neat because you get all that are here, you get to see molten glass just flow and drip into that mold in the moment. And when I was practicing this and playing around with the idea of how to do this last week, I had a very different approach where when we get the fin on there, and you can go ahead and give that a little heat for me, Tom, the fin. I sort of smeared hot gathers of glass around the fin and everything, and then actually dipped this whole post into our furnace to take a gather. When you gather glass, you have to dip into that oven and turn. Now, when you have a really thin fin of colored glass, if you dip that into that furnace and you start to turn, that thin fin heats up instantly and it'll start to kind of mash together. So you don't have a really nice thin ribbon anymore. So the process that we're going to use is really just to encase it as quickly as possible with that molten glass and not distort that ribbon that's on there. All right, Helen, can you just hold when he comes over for me? If you step outside the bench, it'll probably be more comfortable for you. Thanks. We're going to use we call this the hot torch. We have two different torches, a propane torch and this oxygen gas torch. I'll use this to do some spot heating here. Tom is bringing that little piece of ribbon cane over. And when we say the glass is cold right now, this little ribbon is cold, it's just rigid. And cold to us is 1,000 degrees. But I'll superheat the one side and mash this right into that little gap of clear glass. That's perfect, Helen. A little flash on that, please. That's the same kiln shelf that we used for the cane pattern. And on that kiln shelf, to stop the glass from sticking to the ceramic as the two are heated, we put a kiln wash on there. It's just basically like a little mud. And we just like to brush any of that residue off before you really heat the glass back up. All right, Tom, if you want to put a dip on that gathering ball and get yourself ready, I'll chop this down a little and then we should be good to go. So I have to think about fitting this core that I'm creating into that brass mold. I need to make sure that I get clear glass around the entire thing. So I'm going to further chop this ribbon down almost in half just to make the dimension a little bit shorter. See us using a lot of different types of shears. You'll see me use some diamond shears, that's this tool right here. The blades that squeeze together in a diamond shape to do some of the work and the twisting here. But for that little cut, all I needed was the straight shears. Make sure this ribbon stays nice and straight.
As we're building this, we're really building it from the inside out. And this is a common approach to marbles, to paperweights, to vessel making. You're kind of starting with whatever's on the pipe first and working your way outwards. So this inclusion idea, we had an online question wondering if we could embed diamonds or other materials in addition to glass inside of this, these marbles or paperweights. And the answer is it depends. It depends on the kind of glass that you're using. It depends on what you're trying to embed in it. All materials expand and contract a certain amount as they heat and they cool. And some materials expand and contract more than others. So if we're trying to even create an object and using two different kinds of glasses, say borosilicate and soda lime, those they might melt together because glass melts, but they don't really want to stay together.
Yeah, maybe drip a little bit of that off. So Tom's got that gathering ball, and we did this a little bit this morning, kind of prepping for this. And that gathering ball is it's a stainless steel rod with a large chunk of, I believe it's, I'm not sure if it's iron that's on the end of that one or type of steel, but just a giant ball shape. And what that's designed to do is to allow you to gather a very large portion of glass in one shot. I don't know if we've showed that gathering animation. Matt, if we're able to, can we show that gathering animation that shows what the process looks like? At 2,100 Fahrenheit, the glass inside our furnace has the same exact viscosity as table honey. So to gather it out, we have to dip in and turn in one direction. It's really difficult to do that properly. Tom's been working with glass for about, I think, 15, 16 years now. So it makes it look pretty easy. But that larger diameter allows you to gather more glass in one shot. So to build larger pieces, you have to build it up in multiple layers or multiple gathers is what we call it. So he's got one gather of clear glass on that gathering ball already. He just took his second gather. He's kind of shaping it up, portioning it off. And once we're ready here, you'll see him take one large gather and then dump that fresh glass into our gob mold. Now, Helen will do a little torch work. When we cast that gob into the mold, she's going to cut it free with the shears, which leaves a cut mark. Now, I want to plunge this core into some clean, fresh molten glass. So we'll torch that cut mark away, and hopefully we'll get a nice clean encasement here. Tom's using some compressed air right now just to, again, cool the glass, just turn it rigid and stable for him to gather on. I'm going to let this core remain pretty rigid as well. Again, this is really thin, this ribbon cane. So if I overheat this before plunging in that mold, I can distort the ribbon. But I think we're ready anytime you are, Tom.
Timing is so important in these moves like this. If, as Chris mentioned, if his piece is too hot already, when you go to jam it down into all that hot glass, it's going to be soft and wiggly. But if we let stuff stabilize a little bit, cool off and become rigid, then we can build on that structure. So he's going to have nice hot glass, and Chris will be slightly cooler so that he'll have time to push it down into that mold before it starts to heat and soften. All right, nice hot stuff. You can start leveling up a little bit. There we go.
Nice, Tom.
Yeah, it looks really nice. Let's give Tom a big round of applause for that, shall we? Awesome. Ooh, it's so squidgy.
So this is plenty hot right now. I'm going to let this kind of set up a bit. I did one of these earlier and I tried to pull the gob out of the mold a little too soon, and it kind of just ruined the pattern that I had on the inside. There we go. Thank you, Helen.
Mm-hmm.
All right. That worked out pretty good.
Yeah. Nice job, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, let's give him a little love, shall we? Awesome. Beautiful job.
Pulling a gob out of a mold like that it's really an odd sensation for glass makers because the mold, the metal chills the surface. It stiffens the glass up so quickly, leaving the inside really, really gooey. And when you gather glass from the furnace, it's the opposite effect. Now, this mold is something that I actually did work with in Steuben. The Steuben glass factory used to operate right here in this footprint that we're in right now. This is our amphitheater hot shop. And they use gob molds like that to pour molten glass into. They would fill one entire gob mold, and then we called it plugging out. So you take a blowpipe and you would dip into that gob of glass, and they would measure it by time. So the glass in their furnace had a flow rate, and they had a clock. So if you needed, say, 4 pounds of glass, they would let the glass flow for 2 minutes or three minutes, whatever the flow rate was at. But it's one way to get one whole gather without any gathering seams or gather lines in between. But we're using it for this. So that actually worked pretty good. I'm going to let things stabilize a little bit before I start to heat this. I've got a good amount of clear glass that I can just get rid of. And the next move is to now twist and make that core into the latticino with that ribbon spiraling around the outside. I don't know the number of that pink. That was a random bar. I think it's actually, it might be raspberry 65.
It looks like it, raspberry. I have an online glass maker, curious about the colors. But yes, all of our colors, adding metallic oxides into the raw materials of glass give you various colors, but we don't melt our own colors here. We purchase them. So it's always curiosity of glass makers. If they really love a color, then you got to know the number and which company it's from so that you could order that yourself. Yeah, so we got another online question about our furnaces and the heat sources and whether they are kept the same temperature or different temperatures. In general, our furnace is up and running pretty much all the time, 24/7, 365 days, and that's at 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. Sometimes some of us will turn the furnace up a little bit if we have a special project, like Chris turned it up a little bit hotter today because he knew we wanted to have nice flowy glass for this particular process, but it's usually not more than 20 to 50 degrees that will adjust that on a regular basis. Our reheating chamber, same kind of idea. It's meant to be around 2,100 degrees. But if you're doing certain projects that maybe have a lot of delicate parts that you don't want an intense heat, you could turn that down slightly. Or if you're working something big and thick and solid, you want a lot of surface heat, then you can bump that up slightly. They are really nice equipment that is fully adjustable. We have the ability to do so. But in general, about 2,100 degrees for both of those. But now that Chris has all of the pattern, now he's going to slowly work on getting that nice spiral going. And you can notice this is a pretty large chunk of glass. And this is a larger project. Typically, marbles are shrunken versions of whatever this larger package is again. So he'll be, one, getting rid of some excess glass on the end that doesn't include any pattern because, of course, we don't want a blank marble. So he's got to get back to where some of that design is actually present. And then usually the top, the moil area and the tip of these kind of things get thrown away. But if we were going to be making 100 of these marbles, then we'd make a much larger package. And as he has the pattern all worked out, we just start cutting off little chunks off the end. And that would make marble after marble after marble. And that's how a lot of those handmade marbles were made before the invention of the machines that do it. So the little cut mark that you see, you can see he's narrowing down the end of that with a pair of diamond shears, sometimes using a pair of jacks. It's all in pursuit of narrowing down that connection point. And the termination of that is also going to be a very visual aspect of the marble. So Chris takes, when he gets down to where it will be the final marble, he'll take a lot of time making sure that he's getting a really nice cut mark, a really nice connection. And the removal of that cut mark or the punty or ponto mark is a good evidence of handmade marbles. I think my understanding is a lot of machine-made marbles, they are tumbled and they're just cut little chunks, and there's two screw-shaped auger bits kind of that rotate through, so they get that little chunk and then it's just sent down the little marble spiral and it keeps rounding it up as it's going down that unit. And that's how it gets to be a round marble in the end, as opposed to where Chris is going to be forming each one nice and round and individual. But machine-made marbles often have a little cut mark, not that little rounded punty mark in the connection. So that's one way to help identify that.
And that's a great point that Helen brought up about the multiples that you can get out of this one roll up that we call it, the one pattern that we've made. If I were to make some small marbles out of this, I could easily make 50 or so out of what I have. But for the sake of this demonstration, we're going to make them on the larger scale. So it's a little bit more visually appealing for everybody here in our amphitheater. And you'll see me use a marble tool that Carl Siglin created. He's another one of our glass makers and our technician. It's a piece of metal pipe that's been hacked off with a handle welded to it. There's some beeswax applied to it as a lubrication. So I've just cleaned up the tip of this gather, and I'll heat this up, and now is where I'll start to sink this back into the round shape. And I'll do some pre-shaping before I actually use the marble tool. And start forming a constriction eventually where I can break the marble free. And once that's all said and done and we have our shape, we'll do the final steps to this marble and then slowly cool it.
I love that even the little marble that inspired this design here today, that contemporary marble, was only about an inch or two, is actually pretty small. So that could be a marble that could actually be used in play. But working on these very large scale marbles, it's my understanding that sometimes those are just made as showpieces and really to feature and show off the techniques and the designs and the talent of the glassmaker themselves, because there's a lot of energy that goes into the creation of a marble, as you see, and also in the playing with those marbles. So it's nice to tie those together. But this will be a real showstopper version of the marbles. But as you can see, we've got this beautiful pattern embedded in there. And we talked a little bit about how we work from the core out. So if you wanted to add more details, another layer of stripes, another cage to the outside, we could just continue to build that pattern, just like we did the first time, rolling up another layer of cane, rolling up another fin or flattened section, maybe just adding a stripe of solid glass down one edge. So one of the fun things of looking at these kind of objects is to figure out how many parts there were, how many layers went into each one of those objects. And if it's not a marble, we've got a really great collection of paperweights upstairs as well, in the same kind of idea. You start with the core, you maybe add some clear glass around those colored things to give structure so that when you gather over top of it, you don't really disturb those layers. So part of the magic of working with this technique and glass, embedding things in glass, it's sometimes those magic clear layers that you don't see, that those are part of the structure. And if it's all comes together well, you don't trap air, then it just looks like it's floating in the middle of all of that solid glass.
The first marble that I ever made, oh boy, probably a practice marble. When you first learn to blow glass, one of the first tools that I was taught to use were the jacks, and basically take a gather of glass, roll it into a cylinder, and then practice making jack lines. And that essentially makes a little marble. So that's probably the first one that I ever made. It wasn't a functional marble.
It's a good answer. Making those snowmen.
Yep.
Practice.
You've seen me just pick up the jacks and start to squeeze into this gather to begin making that constriction. This is the jacks right here. They're blades that are pretty much like butter knives. It's my favorite tool in glassmaking because they're really so versatile. And I like to make a lot of goblets. I have a lot of fun creating Venetian style goblets. And the jacks really are your right hand when you're going through a lot of those steps. But this is the marble tool. Again, Carl Siglin made this particular one. There's some beeswax on here as a lubrication. Really helps it to glide on the glass. And you just get that nice rounded shape. You can see the constriction that I've already formed right here. That's going to turn into our break-off line. I just want to refine the shape one more time. I'll squeeze that constriction in a little tighter. And then we're really just going to let everything stiffen up. We'll break this off onto a special stand. We have a little fiber ring that we'll set this into and do the cleanup work to the jack line, is what we call the break-off line. We need to remove a little bit of material after we break this free and then round off that mound that's left behind before this marble goes into the annealing oven to slowly cool overnight.
One thing I learned in learning to make paperweights, marbles, things like this, it's really also understanding how that glass is going to move and kind of stretch or compress that pattern. But even the shape itself, you'll notice he didn't start with a round gob and try to make it round. He started with more of an oval and kind of pressed it back on itself. So learning to use the round tool, it really just reinforces the shape, but it's very difficult once you get it close to that shape to kind of add more mass into it. So you almost make it a little bigger and kind of coax it into its final shrunken version, rather than trying to create a sphere. I remember the first time as a beginner trying to make a sphere, and I end up with like a divot, a negative space, because I didn't have just enough to squeeze in there. So it really looks seemingly easy, but you really need to understand how glass moves and the thicknesses, and making sure you've got plenty in that gob to make the nice round shape that you're looking for in the end.
And I'm not sure if the folks that are online looked at the particular marble that we're trying to mimic right now. This one's a bit of a different effect. It's the same basics of the inside, but the one that we're trying to replicate, the core, I've twisted it quite a bit more. I've kind of created this corkscrew effect with the Latticino, the black and white cane on the inside. So this is a bit of a tighter twist, and it makes that corkscrew. So it's not the same, but that's the reason it ends up so much more corkscrewed. Is it quite a bit more twist went into this one, but I like that effect. So again, just letting this kind of stiffen up. When glassmakers say we're cooling the glass, we just mean we're letting it turn rigid. And cold for our glass is about 1,000 degrees or 1,100 Fahrenheit. But I'll give this one good fire polish now just to burn off any mold marks. Thanks, Helen. And then I'll reinforce that constriction using our hot torch, make sure this breaks off, no problem.
So we are coming in on some of our final moments of the demonstration. Are there any other final questions that we can answer to the crowd out here? Nice and loud, sir. Are you asking about what he's got kind of to his left with the metal pieces and the little shelf, the big black thing? So this is a heat shield. So you can see each one of these units has a heat shield, and it's designed to help protect the glass worker. There's 2,000 degrees coming out of those furnaces, and so that's a lot of radiant heat. So really nice hot shops will have heat shields attached to the reheating chambers. So it's got a little teeny shelf, and we can use that like a little Marver table. So like the big giant table that we have, we can roll color or shape glass on that little piece. There's a handle to move stuff around. And this is a little window that's kind of like sunglasses. So if you wanted to lower that and look through that window of more protective glass, then that will help shield you from the UV light as well. Now we wear safety glasses and everything to be safe, but that's just an extra layer of protection while you're staring into that intense heat if you need it. A great question. Any other questions? Fantastic. I know there's probably lots of questions and things going on our online community as well. So thanks again for tuning in and all your great questions so far. It's always fun to interact. We have lots of live streams, lots of YouTube channel events that you can watch and tune into. This is a special one, but we also have every Wednesday. Definitely check in at the museum. There's lots of fun things coming up in the upcoming months.
All right, I think we're ready. Just one last little flash. A flash heat is just a quick overall heat, not to soften anything, but just to make sure the temperatures are where they need to be to avoid the glass from cracking or breaking. And that's why we'll put this into an annealing oven to slowly cool it. And this one will take 12 hours to bring from 900 safely to room temperature. Thank you. So this is that little mound that I was talking about. I purposely left this little mound here so I can heat this up. When you start to heat the jack line, that cut mark, it generates a good amount of scum in the glass. And I'll just kind of heat that mound up enough to use some tweezers and remove some. And then I'll use a little tool that's a wooden tool that's got a concave shape to it to round the top of this out and try to match the sphere that I've formed here for this particular marble.
These are those final details that just really bring these home. Beautiful details to finish it off.
I can't remember if I mentioned it to you all, but the wooden tools that we work with are, most of these are cherry wood. Fruit woods are great for glass making though. With a low resin content to them, they burn pretty clean. So as long as you don't really overuse them on the glass, they don't leave residue behind. Pretty dense wood as well, so they do burn slowly. This torch uses oxygen and natural gas, and I can dial it up or down and change the flame, how broad or how fine it is.
So there was a question whether it was the ribbon was hotter than the Latino cane. At this point, none of the colors will really look like themselves when they're hot. Black and white are kind of an exception. They do tend to look like themselves, but the colors, the pink and the green, certainly will not look like themselves until they come to room temperature. So that might be some of the visuals that you're seeing. They're all the same temperature. They're just not reflecting their true nature.
I didn't do that very well. It's been a while since I've used this tool, and I kind of caught the glass a little bit.
Little burn layer.
Yeah. Again, if I were a marble maker, I would have some very specific tools that would match the size of the marbles I made. This one is not one that matches them, but it gives you the idea of what we're doing here, just contouring that. And I think this one's good to go away. Put into the annealing oven.
Beautiful. Very nice. So we're going to put that away into the annealing oven, and that'll cool down slowly overnight, along with all the samples, all the projects that we do throughout the day. I'm sure we'll post something on that YouTube channel when it's finished. Another image of this beautiful marble. Well, let's give it up for Chris Rochelle. Very nicely done.
All right. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Tom. Thank you to all of you here in the amphitheater and everybody that's joined us online. And we are going to kick it back over online to Troy. He's one of our educators who's been fielding the online community here. So that's in for the folks that are in house with us today. That's going to wrap up this morning's time slot with us. The next demonstration in here begins at 12:30. So you have about 30 minutes before that begins. And that'll be more of a glass blowing show, about 15 minutes in duration. It's narrated from start to finish. So you're welcome to come on back to that. But we will ask you to please exit the theater so we can get everything wiped down and ready for our next demonstration. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thank you.
I'm on mute. Should be wearing that t-shirt. Yeah, I learned a lot there that I didn't even know about watching these, how these get made.
Every time I watch it, I learn something new. It's awesome.
I know, right? It's like, I feel like it's sort of like we're sports announcers. Just watch the game. So it's time for us to wrap up. I want to just say a few things. For those of you who happen to be in our neck of the woods near Corning, New York, this week is winter break, and we have a family guide or a gallery guide that you can use to actually look at all things round and glass in our collection, and it's a lot of fun, and that's free with the ticket, so just pop in and grab one. And I also want to give a shout out to Lauren Moore, who's our queen, and let her know that we're going to be mailing her a bigger version of this, which is similar to what you just saw being made, that will be placed on a glass pedestal in honor of her win a couple years back when we didn't get to see her last year. So anyway, I want to also thank Doug for joining us today and for being kind of a part of the community. You talked about the marble community being a community. We here at the Corning Museum of Glass consider glass a community as well, and we're happy to have you be a part of that. and happy to have anyone out there that's been a part of our time together today. Also, you should consider yourself family as well. So thank you all for tuning in, and we hope to see you at the Corning Museum of Glass. Marble on.